Hash the house on Stillwater Cove. Hash part 1, the rearranging. I was standing at the kitchen counter, slicing a pear, when I heard her voice float in from the hallway. She's just too much, Marcus. The baby needs calm. This house needs calm. And your mother, she's the opposite of calm. The knife paused against the fruit, not because I was startled. I'd been expecting something like this for weeks. I simply wanted to hear it said plainly, without the softening that always came when Vanessa spoke to my face. My son Marcus said something low and soothing. A few moments later, I heard his footsteps in the hall, that particular careful rhythm he'd had since boyhood when he was about to say something difficult. He appeared in the kitchen doorway holding a small stack of glossy pamphlets. He set them on the counter beside my cutting board with the delicate caution of a man diffusing something. Mom, we've been looking into some options, just to look. Sunset Pines is beautiful, it's right on the water, they have gardens, a library. Marcus, I set down the knife and looked at him. Whose name is on the deed to this house? He blinked. Yours. Then I think I'll finish my pear. He picked up the pamphlets and left without another word. My name is Iris Calloway. I am 69 years old. I was an operating room nurse for 31 years at St. Augustine's Medical Center, and before that I was the daughter of a woman who worked 2 jobs and never complained. And before that I was a girl who grew up understanding that nothing in this world is given to you. You build it or you go without. My husband, Thomas, and I built this house ourselves. Not in the romantic sense where people say, we built it, and mean they hired contractors and chose tile samples. I mean we drove the stakes. We poured the footings. We spent 3 consecutive summers doing the framing on weekends with Thomas's brother Gerald and a dog-eared copy of a construction manual we'd ordered from a catalog. We built the stone chimney wrong the first time and tore it down and built it again. We planted the oak trees along the southern fence that are now wide enough that I can't get my arms around them. Thomas died 6 years ago. His heart gave out on a Tuesday in March, the kind of flat gray Tuesday that has no reason to be the worst day of your life. I updated my will the following month, on my attorney Diane Kessler's advice, and every legal document pertaining to this property bears my name alone. Iris Margaret Calloway, sole owner, 14 Stillwater Cove Road, Heron Bay, Maine. I tell you all of this so you understand precisely what was at stake when my daughter-in-law Vanessa decided it was time for me to vacate my own life. It started, as these things always do, with something reasonable. Vanessa arrived in my son's life 4 years ago, sharp-featured and confident, with the particular kind of intelligence that presents itself as helpfulness. She had opinions about everything and delivered them in a tone so measured, so genuinely pleasant, that disagreeing with her felt like disagreeing with common sense itself. She moved into this house 18 months ago when Marcus accepted a position at the Marine Biology Station 30 minutes north. They needed somewhere to land while they searched for their own place, they said. 3 months, maybe 4. That was 18 months ago. I didn't mind at first. The house is large. Thomas and I had always intended it for a family that never quite materialized the way we'd imagined. Marcus is our only child. The rooms that were meant for others stayed empty for years, and having voices in them again felt briefly like something restored. But Vanessa rearranged things. I don't mean that as a metaphor, though it works as one. I mean she physically moved objects. The blue ceramic pitcher my mother brought back from Portugal in 1987 disappeared from the windowsill above the sink. When I asked, Vanessa smiled and said she'd put it somewhere safer. The glaze was cracking and she didn't want it to break. I thanked her and didn't say that the cracking glaze was 30 years old and I'd made my peace with it. The wool throw blanket Thomas and I had bought on our anniversary trip to Nova Scotia came off the back of the reading chair. Vanessa said it clashed with the new cushion covers she'd ordered, which I hadn't known were coming. The framed photograph of Thomas and me on our wedding day, the one that had hung in the same spot on the living room wall for 28 years, was gone one morning when I came downstairs. Just gone, the nails still in the wall, a pale rectangle where the paint was slightly less faded. When I asked Vanessa about it, she touched my arm and said, "Oh, I moved it to keep it safe while I repainted the trim. I'll put it back, I promise." She never did. When I looked for it a week later, I found it in a cardboard box in the closet of what she had started calling the guest room, the room that had been Thomas's study for 20 years. I didn't say anything about that either. I noted it, and I waited. The pregnancy announcement came on a Sunday evening in early spring. I was genuinely happy. Whatever had been developing between Vanessa and me, whatever careful maneuvering was already in progress, a grandchild was something real and separate from all of it. I hugged Marcus for a long time. But I noticed, over the weeks that followed, how the pregnancy became a kind of atmosphere in the house, something that permeated every conversation and justified every request. Vanessa began sleeping later and later in the mornings, and on the occasions when I started coffee early or made a phone call before 9, she would appear at the top of the stairs in her robe, with the particular expression of someone making a great effort to be patient. "The doctor says the first trimester sleep is critical," she told me once, her voice kind, her meaning precise. "Even small sounds can interrupt the cycle." I said I understood. I started making my coffee in the small percolator I kept in my bedroom. Marcus began saying, "The doctor says about many things. The doctor says stress can cause complications. The doctor says the home environment should be as peaceful as possible. The doctor says Vanessa needs to minimize disruptions to her routine." I've worked alongside doctors for 31 years. I know what they say and what they don't say. Minimize disruptions to your mother-in-law's morning routine is not standard obstetric advice. But I didn't argue. I went to bed earlier so the kitchen was free in the mornings. I moved my phone calls to my bedroom. I stopped cooking anything with garlic after Vanessa mentioned that strong smells were affecting her. The concessions were small, and I made them without resentment, because that's what you do when someone you love is carrying a child. What I also did, quietly, in the evenings after everyone had gone to bed, was begin keeping records. I've kept a nursing log for most of my adult life. Old habit. Date, time, observation, context. In 31 years of surgical nursing, I learned that memory is unreliable and documentation is not. Whatever happens, whatever is disputed or denied or reframed, a contemporaneous written record is a thing that stands. I bought a new notebook, dark green, hardcover, the kind that doesn't look like a journal, and I began writing. March 7, Thomas's wedding portrait removed from living room wall. Location now, cardboard box, closet off former study. No discussion, no permission asked. March 11, Vanessa tells neighbor Dorothy Walsh that the house is too crowded for a healthy pregnancy. Dorothy mentioned this to me while returning a pot she'd borrowed. March 14, Marcus asks me to try to be understanding about Vanessa's need for quiet mornings. Exact words. "She's not trying to be difficult, Mom. She's just fragile right now." Noted. He avoided eye contact throughout. March 19, found my blue ceramic dishes, the Portuguese set I've used for 20 years, in the cabinet under the basement stairs. Replaced in kitchen with Vanessa's white stoneware. No discussion. I added a doorbell camera, the kind that records motion and stores footage automatically. I told Marcus I'd been worried about coyotes getting into the garden at night, which was partially true. I also installed a small secondary camera on the porch, angled toward the driveway. I backed up the footage every 3 days to an external hard drive I kept in the locked drawer of Thomas's old desk, the one piece of furniture in the house that Vanessa had not yet rearranged. I am 69 years old, a retired surgical nurse, and the sole legal owner of the property I was being managed out of. I am also the daughter of a woman who taught me that quiet watchfulness is not weakness. It is the most efficient form of preparation. One afternoon, while I was deadheading the roses along the back fence, my neighbor Ruth Pellegrino came through the gate with a jar of her beach plum jam, which she makes every August and distributes like a ritual. Ruth is 74, small and direct, with the kind of face that has stopped worrying about whether it looks friendly. "Iris," she said without preamble, "I saw your daughter-in-law at the Harbor Cafe last week. She was with a man." I kept working on the roses. Marcus has colleagues from the station. They eat there sometimes. This wasn't from the station, Ruth said. I know the station people. This was someone I've never seen. He drove a black car, one of those big German ones. Dark suit, one of those wide watches that men wear when they want you to know the watch is expensive. She paused. They were sitting very close together, Iris, the way people sit when they've forgotten to leave space. I straightened up and looked at her. Did you speak to her? I lifted my hand to wave. She looked straight through me. Ruth held out the jam jar. I don't know what it means. I thought you should know. I took the jam and thanked her. That night, I opened the green notebook. March 28. Ruth Pellegrino reports seeing Vanessa at Harbor Cafe with unknown male. Description: tall, broad, approximately 45, dark suit, luxury vehicle, black, German make, prominent watch. Vanessa appeared not to recognize Ruth when Ruth attempted to make eye contact. Ruth is a reliable witness and has no motive for fabrication. I read the entry twice. Then I wrote underneath it in a different color pen, unclear significance, monitor. Part 2, the evidence. The thing about people who believe they are cleverer than everyone else is that they stop checking their assumptions. Vanessa had decided, at some point, that I was a manageable inconvenience, an older woman who could be gently redirected, whose protests could be smoothed over with kind words, and whose attention could be distracted with pamphlets for retirement communities. She had made that assessment and stopped updating it, which is a fundamental error. In a hospital, we called it anchoring bias. You form an initial impression of a patient's condition and stop looking for evidence that might complicate the picture. I had been a quiet, accommodating presence in the house for months. I had made concessions without complaint. From Vanessa's perspective, I was behaving exactly as she expected. She had no reason to believe I was doing anything else. She was wrong. Over the following weeks, I gathered the following. The doorbell camera captured a man arriving at the house on 2 occasions when Marcus was away overnight for work. The first time, he arrived at 9:40 in the evening and left at 11:15. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wore a dark jacket. He did not look at the camera. The second time, he arrived at 10:20 and left after midnight. On the second visit, I could see the watch on his left wrist clearly when he passed under the porch light. Large-faced, silver, with the particular gleam of something expensive. I retrieved his name from a business card I found on the kitchen counter one morning. He had apparently set it there, and Vanessa hadn't noticed. The card read, Derek Langford, Senior Partner, Langford Capital Group. There was a cell number and a Boston address. I photographed the card and returned it to the counter. By the time Vanessa came downstairs, it was gone. I found, on the notepad beside the kitchen telephone, the one we kept for grocery lists and messages, an impression left by the pen on the page above. I had seen detectives do this in films and assumed it was an exaggeration. It isn't. I held a pencil flat to the paper, shaded lightly across the surface, and brought up the ghost of what had been written. Dee confirmed, after she's out, yes, the whole property, call me. I tore off the page carefully, placed it in an evidence envelope. Yes, I had ordered a box of them, the kind used for legal documents, and locked it in the desk. I emailed my attorney, Diane Kessler. Diane, I need to verify my property documentation and discuss what protections are in place if someone attempts to contest or transfer ownership. Can we meet this week? Her reply came within 2 hours. Of course, Thursday at 10, bring whatever you have. At Thursday's meeting, Diane spread my documents on her conference table and went through them methodically. Deed, clear. Title insurance, current. Property taxes, paid and in my name. Will, updated 6 years ago with no subsequent modifications. No liens, no co-ownership. No power of attorney granted to anyone. This property is yours completely, she said. No one can touch it without your consent, and no legal proceeding to contest that would succeed without substantial grounds, which don't exist. What if someone tried to pressure me into signing something? Diane looked at me over her reading glasses. Then we'd have a very different conversation and considerably more legal tools at our disposal. She paused. Iris, what's happening? I told her what I had. The camera footage. The notepad impression, Ruth's observation at the cafe, the systematic removal of my possessions from visible areas of the house, the pamphlets for senior facilities that had begun appearing at regular intervals. Diane listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Continue documenting," she said. "Don't confront, don't reveal what you have, let it develop." She picked up her pen. "And Iris, if you ever feel unsafe, you call me directly any hour." I told her I didn't feel unsafe. I felt, for the first time in months, as though I was back on solid ground. The party was Vanessa's idea, though she presented it as a mutual celebration. "A little gathering," she told me one morning over breakfast, the tone she reserved for ideas she'd already decided on. "To celebrate the baby. Your friends, my friends, Marcus's colleagues. It would mean so much to have everyone together." I said it sounded lovely. What she did not tell me was that she had invited 40 people, hired a caterer, ordered decorations, and arranged for the event to take place while I was supposed to be at my garden club meeting. When my meeting was canceled due to a water pipe issue at the community center, and I came home 2 hours early, I pulled into my driveway to find it lined with unfamiliar cars. I sat in my own car for a moment and breathed. Inside the house, the living room had been entirely transformed. Pale yellow and white everywhere, fabric draping, balloon clusters, a banner stretched across the mantel. A long table held platters of food and a tiered cake. Women I didn't know stood in groups, laughing. Where Thomas's portrait had hung, in the place of prominence above the fireplace that had been its home for over 2 decades, there was now a large framed print of a watercolor seascape. Tasteful, impersonal, belonging to no one. Vanessa spotted me from across the room. For half a second, something crossed her face, not quite guilt, more like the recalculation of someone adjusting a plan. Then she smiled and came toward me with her arms slightly open, the gesture of someone greeting a guest in someone else's house. "Iris, you're early. We wanted to surprise you, isn't it wonderful?" I looked around the room calmly and said, "You've been busy." "We just wanted everything to feel fresh and happy for the baby." She leaned in slightly. "I hope you don't mind that I rearranged a few things, just for the party." "Of course," I said. I took out my phone, held it up with a smile. "Do you mind if I take a few pictures? I'd like to remember all of this." She gestured graciously. "Please." I spent the next 40 minutes photographing everything. Every inch of the room, every missing family picture, every piece of furniture that had been shifted, every decorative object of Vanessa's that had replaced something of mine. I photographed the seascape print above the fireplace and the bare wall hook where Thomas had hung. In the kitchen, I found Derek Langford. I had never seen him in person, only on the doorbell camera footage, so it took me a moment to place him. He was standing near the back door speaking quietly with Vanessa. Tall, broad, the expensive watch clearly visible at his wrist. He was holding an envelope. I stepped into the kitchen with the pretext of refilling my glass. They both looked up. "Iris," Vanessa said, without missing a beat, "this is Derek. He works with Marcus sometimes, through the university's funding board." Derek extended a hand. "Mrs. Calloway, lovely home." "Thank you," I said, shaking it. "I've always thought so." Something in his expression adjusted slightly. He handed the envelope to Vanessa in a motion that tried to be casual and was not. And she tucked it quickly under her arm. I smiled at them both, said I was going to check on the garden, and walked out the back door. On the patio, out of sight, I pressed record on my phone's audio application and slipped it back into my cardigan pocket. Then I came back inside through the side door, passed through the laundry room, and stood quietly on the other side of the kitchen wall. I heard Vanessa's voice, low and rapid. She wasn't supposed to be here. And Derek's calm. "It doesn't matter, she doesn't know anything." "What if she?" "Vanessa," his voice was patient, the patience of someone accustomed to being in control of situations. "The whole point is that she sees a happy family gathering and nothing else. Old women see what they expect to see." A pause. "Once she moves," he continued, "the property situation takes care of itself. You said Marcus will cooperate. Marcus does what keeps everyone happy, Vanessa said. He always has. I stood in the laundry room for another 30 seconds, then walked back out to the party. That night, after the guests had gone and Marcus had fallen asleep, I sat at Thomas's desk with the audio file playing through my earphones. I listened to it 3 times. Then I transferred it to the external hard drive, backed it up to my cloud account, and emailed a copy to a second email address I'd created specifically for this purpose. I opened the green notebook. April 14, party at house, approximately 40 guests, no family photos present, Thomas's portrait replaced with generic print above fireplace, Derek Langford present, envelope exchanged, overheard conversation in kitchen, audio recorded, file, April 14 kitchen. Key statement: once she moves, the property situation takes care of itself, and old women see what they expect to see. I set the pen down and looked at that last line for a moment. Then I wrote underneath it, correction noted. Part 3, the confrontation. I chose a Sunday morning for the first move. Not because Sunday has any legal significance, but because Marcus was home and Vanessa's friends were not. I wanted an audience of exactly 2 people, my son and the woman who had been systematically erasing me from my own home for the better part of a year. I made breakfast. Proper breakfast, eggs, toast, the good coffee, the blue Portuguese dishes I had quietly retrieved from the basement cabinet and washed and returned to their correct shelf 3 days earlier. Vanessa had not yet noticed. When they both came downstairs, I was already seated at the kitchen table. In the center of the table, I had placed a manila envelope. Marcus looked at it with the expression of a man who knows something is about to happen and has run out of ways to prevent it. Vanessa sat down and reached for the coffee, casual, apparently unconcerned. "What's that?" she asked, nodding at the envelope. "Property documentation," I said. I thought it would be useful to go through it together. I opened the envelope and laid the papers flat on the table. The deed, the title document, the letter from Diane Kessler confirming sole ownership, the most recent property tax notice with my name across the top. I arranged them in a neat row and turned them to face the 2 of them. Marcus picked up the deed and read it. I watched his face as he moved through the legal language, the measured, repetitive language of property law, which has the quality of being absolutely precise and absolutely unmistakable. When he reached the section designating sole ownership, his jaw tightened. "Mom," he said carefully, "we know the house is yours. No one said it wasn't." "I know," I said. "I just want us all to have the same information, clearly, so there are no misunderstandings later." Vanessa's coffee cup met the saucer with a small, controlled click. "Is this really necessary?" "Probably not," I said pleasantly. "But I find that paperwork is very efficient. It says exactly what it means." A silence stretched across the table. "I know about Derek Langford," I said. Vanessa went very still. "I know about his visits. I have camera footage from 2 occasions." I kept my voice even, informational, the tone I used when delivering post-operative briefings. "I have a recording of a conversation between the 2 of you at the party on April 14th, in which he refers to a property situation that will take care of itself once I move out. I have a notepad impression from the kitchen telephone pad." I paused. "I have, in short, a fairly complete picture." Marcus set the deed down slowly. He looked at Vanessa. "What is she talking about?" Vanessa's expression went through several changes in rapid succession. Alarm, calculation, and then the particular resolve of someone deciding to hold their position regardless. "Marcus, she's upset. She's been feeling displaced, and this is..." "What is she talking about, Vanessa?" The silence that followed was the kind I recognized from surgical suites when something has gone unexpectedly wrong. A total, attentive quiet in which everyone is recalibrating. "Derek is a friend," Vanessa said. Her voice had shifted, shed its warmth, become something flatter and more functional. "He's been helping me think through some financial options, for us, for our future." "In my house," I said, "at 10 o'clock at night." "It wasn't," she stopped. I looked at my son. In his face, I saw the thing I had been most concerned about. Not anger, but confusion. Marcus hates confusion because he hates conflict, and confusion leads to conflict, and his entire relational strategy has always been to remain in motion so that nothing catches up with him. Right now, he was caught. "Marcus," I said quietly, "I'm not telling you this to hurt you. I'm telling you because you deserve accurate information. Whatever Derek Langford's role is in Vanessa's life, it is not what she has represented it as." "That is a lie," Vanessa said sharply. The softness was fully gone now. "This is exactly what she does, Marcus. She finds a way to insert herself, to create drama, to keep us from having our own life." "She recorded a conversation in her own home," Marcus said slowly, "in a house that is legally hers." He looked at me. "Is there more?" "Yes," I said. "Can I see it?" "You can see all of it." I will not detail every hour of what followed. Some of it belongs to Marcus alone. The questions he asked, the answers he received, the long hours in which I heard voices from the far end of the house and stayed carefully in my own room with a book I was not reading. What I will tell you is this. By the following Wednesday, Vanessa had moved out. She left in stages, over 2 days, and on the second day, Derek Langford's black car appeared in my driveway to take the last of her boxes. I watched from the upstairs window. She didn't look back at the house. Marcus sat in the kitchen for a very long time after the car left. I made soup, the good broth kind, the kind that takes 3 hours, and set a bowl in front of him and sat down across the table. "I should have seen it," he said. "You saw what you were shown," I said. "There's a difference." "I brought her into your house." "It's your house too, Marcus. It's always been your house too." I looked at him until he looked back. "That's the part she was wrong about. She thought it was a resource to be acquired, but a home isn't a resource." He nodded, eyes wet, not quite crying. "I should have listened to you earlier," he said. "You didn't have the information earlier," I said. "Now you do. That's what matters." We ate the soup. Outside, the oaks Thomas and I had planted were coming into leaf, the first green of the year, tentative and very bright. Part 4, the legal close. Diane Kessler drafted the formal notices and managed the remaining legal details with the efficiency I had always admired in her. A 30-day formal vacation notice went out the day after Vanessa left, not because she hadn't already gone, but because the legal record should be clean. Derek Langford, it turned out, had been under regulatory review by the state financial authority for misrepresenting investment returns to private clients. I read about it in the business section of the Portland paper 3 weeks after Vanessa moved out. His firm was suspended pending investigation. I clipped the article and placed it in the green notebook without comment. The file was officially closed on a morning in early May when Diane sent a brief email confirming that no legal response or counterclaim had been received. The notice period had expired, and the property documentation was fully in order. I read the email twice, set my coffee down, and looked out at the garden. The tulips I'd planted along the south wall the previous autumn had come up beautifully. I hadn't been sure they would. It had been a hard winter. And I'd put them in late, but there they were, red and yellow, standing very straight in the morning light. I went outside and looked at them for a while. "There you are," I said to no one in particular, or perhaps to Thomas, who had always liked tulips and always maintained they were tougher than they looked. Part 5, what the house became. Marcus stayed. I want to be clear about that because it matters. He didn't retreat or disappear the way people sometimes do when they've been wrong about something important. He stayed, and in the weeks following Vanessa's departure, he became useful in the way that men who have been passive for too long sometimes become. Vigorously, almost urgently, as though physical action is the most honest form of apology available to them. He repointed the front walkway stones, which had been spreading apart since the previous winter's frost. He rebuilt the garden gate that had been hanging at an angle since Thomas died. He cleaned the gutters, fixed the dryer vent, replaced the soft boards on the back porch steps. He did all of this without being asked and without calling attention to it, which told me something good about him. He also, at my suggestion, began seeing a therapist, a practical, direct woman in town named Dr. Osai, who Marcus reported was not interested in being nice about anything, which I took as a recommendation. Thomas's portrait went back above the fireplace. I rehung it myself, on a fresh nail, at the precise height it had always occupied. I stepped back and looked at my husband's face in the afternoon light. "All right," I told him. "We're all right." One June morning, I read a small notice in the Heron Bay Gazette. The Coastal Women's Support Network was appealing to community members for temporary housing assistance. Their facility was at capacity. Women and children in immediate need of safe placement were being turned away. I read the notice twice. Then I looked around the living room, at the space along the south wall where I'd moved the reading chair back to its correct position, at the guest room with its fresh paint, smell, and clean linen, at the house that was mine fully and completely, and therefore mine to decide about. I called the number in the notice. The coordinator, a woman named B, had the voice of someone who has learned to expect less than they need and is perpetually surprised when more arrives. When I explained that I had a furnished room available and could offer it month by month, she went quiet for a moment. "We have a woman right now," she said carefully. "She's 41. She has a 7-year-old boy. She's been with us 8 days, and we need to move her somewhere safer before the end of the week." "Tell her there's a room," I said. Her name was Celia. She arrived on a Thursday with her son Mateo, who was 7 and small for his age, and had the particular self-containment of children who have learned that drawing attention to themselves has consequences. He stood in my hallway holding his mother's hand and looked at everything with careful, calibrating eyes. I crouched down to his level. "Mateo, I have a question. It's very important." He looked at me directly, which told me something. "In the garden," I said, "there is a stone path. On either side of it, there are 2 very large frogs who live under the hostas and come out in the evening. Their names are Copernicus and Bean. Do you think you could help me keep an eye on them?" He considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "Are they nice frogs?" "Copernicus is dignified. Bean is enthusiastic." "Okay," he said, and that was that. Celia stood behind him with her arms slightly crossed, the posture of someone who has learned to brace. When our eyes met, I didn't say anything reassuring because reassurance from a stranger can feel like one more thing to evaluate for sincerity. I just said, "The room is at the end of the hall, there are extra blankets in the closet, and dinner is at 6 if you want it. If you don't, that's fine too." She uncrossed her arms, not much but some. "Thank you," she said. "You don't have to thank me," I said. "Just close the door whenever you need to." Having Mateo in the house was like having weather in it, not destructive weather, but the animated, changeable kind that moves through a space and leaves it feeling more alive than before. He investigated every corner with scientific thoroughness. He discovered the frogs within the first 24 hours and reported their coordinates to me at breakfast with the precision of a field researcher. He made friends with the old orange cat who lived under the garden shed, and who had previously refused to acknowledge any human being on the property, including me. Marcus came for dinner on a Sunday in July, and found Mateo asleep on the living room sofa with the cat across his knees, and a library book spread open on his chest. "Mom," he said in the kitchen quietly, "what is this?" "What does it look like?" "It looks like you've adopted a child." "It looks like there's a child sleeping on my sofa," I said. "Which is what a sofa is for, among other things." He looked at me for a long moment. In his face, I saw the thing I'd been watching for, not the particular guilt of someone who has done wrong, but the larger, cleaner kind of reckoning that comes when you understand what was almost lost. "She almost took this," he said quietly. "Yes. And now he gestured vaguely at the living room, the sleeping child, the cat. "Doing whatever I like with it," I said, "because it's mine." Celia stayed 6 weeks. When she left, it was because she'd found a position and a place of her own, not a retreat but an advance, which is the direction that matters. She came to find me in the garden the morning she was leaving, Mateo already in the car, the trunk packed. I don't know how to say this properly, she said. You don't have to say anything at all, I told her. I want to, she looked at the house. When we came here, I was so tired of being careful all the time, of thinking about every movement, every word, and she stopped. You just let us be here, without making it a thing. I looked at her. A house is just walls and a roof if no one's living in it properly. She hugged me quickly, which I hadn't expected and found I didn't mind at all. Then she went to the car and Mateo pressed his face against the window and made an extremely funny expression that I'm fairly sure was supposed to communicate something about Copernicus and Bean. I raised my hand, and they drove away. Part 6, the room with the window. After Celia and Mateo left, I stood in the guest room for a while. The room still smelled faintly of the sunscreen Mateo had used, and there was a small sticky handprint on the windowsill that I decided to leave for now. I looked at the space, the clean-made bed, the chair by the window, the vase of garden flowers I replaced weekly. For a long time, I had been afraid of exactly this room, or rather of what it represented. The idea that the house could be reclaimed from me one relationship at a time, one piece of furniture at a time, until I woke up one morning in a place I no longer recognized. Vanessa had understood at some instinctive level that if you alter a space thoroughly enough, the person it belongs to begins to doubt their own claims on it. It's a very old strategy. It works more often than it should. What Vanessa had not understood, what perhaps she was too young or too certain to consider, is that claiming a space has nothing to do with the objects you place in it. It has to do with what you are willing to do in order to stay. I was willing to watch and wait for months. I was willing to keep meticulous records in a dark green notebook. I was willing to install cameras on my own porch and learn to check timestamps on audio files and sit in the dark of a laundry room listening to a conversation I was not meant to hear. I was willing to be underestimated, which is, in my experience, the most consistently useful thing a person can be. What Vanessa had not reckoned with was that I was a surgical nurse. I've spent 31 years in environments where a lapse in attention is the difference between life and death. I know how to watch. I know how to document. I know how to wait for the right moment and then act with precision. She thought she was dealing with a sentimental old woman who could be soothed and redirected. She was dealing with someone who had spent 3 decades making consequential decisions under pressure, and who had built her own house with her own hands, and who had no intention of leaving it. Part 7, what remained. By late August, Diane Kessler had filed the final closure documents. The legal matter was over completely, sealed and recorded. I had dinner with her that Friday at the Harbor Restaurant, and we split a bottle of wine and talked about things that had nothing to do with property law. On the walk home, the evening was warm and still, the harbor water flat and glittering under the early stars. I walked slowly and thought about Thomas, as I often do in the evenings when the light is like this, that late amber light that doesn't occur in any other season. Thomas would have handled all of this very differently. He would have confronted Vanessa directly and immediately, because he was a direct man who trusted direct action. He would have made the confrontation clean but overwhelming, like a sudden storm. It would have been satisfying to watch and probably somewhat less effective, because Vanessa was the kind of person who could hold her position under direct fire. She was not the kind of person who could withstand a long, quiet campaign of truth-gathering by someone she'd assumed was harmless. I'm not sure Thomas would have understood my approach completely, but I think he would have recognized the outcome. I walked home through the September evening, and the oaks were beginning to think about turning, just at the edges of their leaves, the first suggestion of gold. The Coastal Women's Support Network called again in September, then again in October. Each time I had the room, each time I said yes. I put a small handmade sign by the front door, not anything that announced itself, just a small square of painted wood that said Callaway House, temporary welcome. The women at the network knew what it meant. That was enough. Marcus came most Sunday evenings for dinner. He had started to resemble himself again, the particular quality he'd had as a boy before he learned to avoid conflict, a directness and warmth that Vanessa's careful management had slowly eroded. Dr. Osai, his therapist, was apparently continuing to be refreshingly uninterested in being nice about things, which seemed to be working. He was, for the first time in years, genuinely good company. One Sunday evening in October, we sat on the back porch after dinner and watched the light go off the harbor. It was cold enough for sweaters, the air carrying the first real edge of winter. "Do you think about her?" he asked. He didn't have to say who. "Sometimes," I said. "Not the way you mean, I think." "What way?" I considered it. "I think about what she was trying to do. Not because it bothers me, it doesn't anymore, but because it's instructive. She was trying to take something that wasn't hers by making the person it belonged to feel like she didn't belong in it. It's a very particular kind of strategy. Patient, incremental, hard to name until you see the whole shape of it." Marcus was quiet. "The blue dishes," I said. "In the basement, the photographs, the morning coffee, every single adjustment on its own seemed perfectly reasonable. Caring, even, that's what made it effective." I looked at the harbor. "And that's what documentation is for, because when you write it down date by date, you can see the shape. You can see what would have been invisible otherwise." He nodded slowly. "I should have seen it," he said. "You were inside it," I said. "That's different from watching it from outside." The harbor was dark now, the lights of the boats small and scattered. An owl somewhere in the back garden asked its question and received no answer. "Mom," Marcus said eventually, "thank you for not leaving." I looked at him. "This is my house," I said. "Where else would I go?" He laughed a real laugh, the kind that comes without warning. After a moment, I laughed too. The night settled around us, cool and clear, and the house behind us was lit in 3 windows. The kitchen, the guest room where our current guest was quietly reading, and the living room where Thomas's portrait hung in its correct place above the fireplace, the warm light of the table lamp just reaching the lower edge of the frame. Afterward. I still keep the green notebook, though I use it differently now. Less for evidence, more for the ordinary record of days. The frogs Copernicus and beans survived the summer. The tulips are in for another year, a different variety, more burgundy than red. Ruth Pellegrino comes for tea on Thursdays, which has become a standing arrangement that neither of us formally established, but both of us intend to continue indefinitely. She brings beach plum jam in season and opinions about everything year-round. Diane Kessler sends me the occasional legal article that she thinks I'll find relevant, which I do. We've talked about the possibility of me doing some volunteer work with the County Housing Authority, helping women in contested property situations understand their documentation options. It's not something I've committed to yet, but I think about it. Marcus is well. He is not the person he was 2 years ago, which is entirely to his credit. The house is mine. It was always mine. The difference now is that I know, in a way I didn't quite know before, exactly what that means and exactly what I'm willing to do to make it remain true. Vanessa thought she was dealing with an old woman who could be managed. She was dealing with a surgical nurse, a builder, a keeper of records, and the daughter of a woman who worked 2 jobs and never complained. She was dealing with someone who has looked at difficult situations without flinching for the better part of 7 decades, and who understood long before Vanessa made her first move that the most powerful thing in any standoff is not the one who speaks first. It's the one who knows when to stay quiet and what to do with the silence. The house sits on Stillwater Cove Road in a town on the coast of Maine, and in the evenings when the light comes off the water at the right angle, the windows catch it and hold it for a moment before letting it go. I notice this every day. I have noticed it for 30 years, and I intend to go on noticing it for as long as I am able, from this house, in this place, on this ground that Thomas and I staked and built and filled with a life. Nobody is taking that from me. Nobody who tried ever got very far. For anyone who has ever been made to feel like a visitor in their own life, stay, document, be patient. Trust that the truth, given enough time and light, will reveal the whole shape of what was done and who is left standing when it does.